Welcome to today. Could you please, for everyone that has not had the opportunity to meet you, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ryan Pavel. I have the distinct privilege of serving as the CEO of Warrior Scholar Project, a national 501(c)(3) that helps enlisted veterans kick ass in higher education. Did my 5 year stint in the Marine Corps on the enlisted side, was an Arabic translator, got out, had my own interesting transition to and through higher education. I'm a lawyer by training, don't hold it against me. And now this is, I landed my dream job.
So tell me what this dream job is about. So first off, for everyone, full disclosure, I am a huge, with a capital HUGE, supporter of the Warrior Scholar Project. And this is why. I had the opportunity to be a participant on the this last summer that happened, and I was at Yale University. We were there, and the program was magnificent. Not only from the perspective of what you're getting and experiencing, but also getting to meet the community, the both advisors, faculty, and how the process works in each university. So you get to leave that, full on, but also you get this opportunity to almost have like a boot camp mini session on what your finals week would look like. You're juggling life, you're juggling school, and plus on top of that, you still have to study. So it's just an amazing event. So with that being said, can you tell us a little bit more, Ryan?
Yeah, of course. Well, it's always best to hear it from somebody who's gone through the boot camp, right? Who's actually able to speak from the experience of what they went through. But I think you hit on some really important points, right? So the core flagship programming for Warrior Scholar Project, the ethos of the entire project, is to say that those who served have the opportunity to really be able to dig in and to excel in higher education. And so these flagship programs of ours are in partnership with 20 some odd colleges and universities throughout the country, where we are running folks such as yourself, enlisted veterans, service members, reservists, guardsmen, through a rigorous, intensive academic boot camp. And on the other end of that, folks should have the confidence to say, you know what? I actually have what it takes to succeed in higher education, no matter what your preconceived notions were about that. Many people, such as myself, enlisted in part because it was like, the academics, I'm not so sure, right? So on the other end, how do we help build up that confidence for folks? And then also the skill set, right? How do you actually break down complex texts for a humanities level course? How do you do problem solving on the STEM side? How do you put together something like a case study on the business side? So really diving into what some of that substance looks like so people can wrap their arms around it, right? It's not just an admissions presentation of saying, here's what it looks like to go to school here. It's immersing you in what a classroom would look like. And you use that, that phrase of like a finals week. We mean it when we call it this intensive boot camp experience, right? It's like 75 hours of work that we expect of the students in a week. You feel that, right? You lose some sleep. And we want to be able to simulate what that's like so that people can understand you have what it takes to succeed there. And here's how you leverage all the various resources to include tutors, to include instructors, to include materials that are tailor made to be able to help you succeed so that you can survive that, right? And indeed actually thrive in that environment. An important piece of it as well is, the VA is spending a little over $12 billion every year on education benefits these days. Huge chunk of that is GI Bill. Another big portion of it comes from VRNE, technically an employment program, right? But a lot of that gets funneled or gets allocated into higher education to help people, disabled veterans, find gainful employment. And billions of those dollars are going towards degrees where people are getting them without a whole lot of intention, right? And our firmly held belief, there's a lot of data to back up this belief as well, is that the more informed you are at multiple stages of the educational track, the better the outcomes will be, right? And so we view this not just as certainly not a degree mill boot camp, right? Um, and also not saying you have to go to one of these institutions, right? Or you have to pursue this type of degree, but much more about opening up that world of possibility, widening the aperture for what veterans think is possible, and then helping them understand how do I build community with the people to my left and my right to really maximize this experience, and ultimately that makes people not only successful in the classroom but in society.
And I want to talk about one specific part that you mentioned, right? That really has resonated with me, right? So for everyone that, quick refresher, right? I just retired from the Navy last year. So I had been already in school for almost a year. Actually, a year. I had just finished a year in community college before I went to your program. And even then, I still had the imposter syndrome, right? Um, and going to Yale was, it's just like, oh, cool, at least it's in my bucket list. I did it. Talking to my brother and my sister going to the university, it was really funny because they would say, "Hey, you can tell everyone you went to Yale." Actually, there's a precedent. There was a precedent person that was running for presidency in Mexico a long time ago who only went there for summer
Mm,
to Harvard University. But anything everyone knew about him through his presidency campaign was that he was a Harvard graduate, and that's how they
mm,
would present him, right?
right.
And so that was a running joke that I
Yeah.
would be doing that. Now, fast forward to the end of the to the boot camp, there were so as a Navy chief, we go through the initiation and the process, and there was so many things that I related through the experience of the Warrior Scholar Project to the entire season as a Navy chief. And
Yeah.
that was huge. That was beautiful. But I cannot tell you how much it made an impact on me.
Mm,
I literally was on my car with my sister, and we couldn't even leave the outskirts of the school when she asked me, "So how was it?" And I was so overwhelmed with emotions that she pulled the car over, and we were there for about an hour because I
mm,
was emotionally, literally crying, emotionally, but most of all, extremely grateful for the opportunity to be able to be there. And since then, I've kept in contact with so many people that were there, and it has empowered me to one, believe in myself even more, right? And to say, well, these are different things, different perspectives. So it's not just about, like you mentioned, it's not just about going and I can be successful in school. It's about the transition process that all of us, when we leave the military,
yeah.
face.
Yeah.
And it really does allow us the opportunity to build in and to search deeper things that can change our entire world.
Sure.
So,
Sure. I mean, I think that there's so many important things to what you just hit on there. So WSP is a very identity-based organization, which is to say that a lot of what we do, a lot of the actual transformation comes in our baked in since our founding, our insistence on wrestling with the harder questions of who you are and who you want to be. Right now, explicitly in the field guide, we wrote a guide called the Warrior Scholars Field Guide, which we use for the college success curriculum.
yes.
And this is one of the things that now it's explicitly in there, but we encourage folks to really spend some time wrestling with that tough question, right? So, at who is Yogi at the time when you are, applying to WSP at this time of retirement, right? Like, oh my goodness, right? Like, who are you then, as opposed to when you enlisted in the first place, right? Who are you when you show up to the Yale campus? Who are you, when you leave that? And that this is something which is this ever evolving conceptualization of the self. And I don't mean to turn this into a psychoanalytical seminar, but I think that there is something which is really important around how we perceive ourselves, right? And how we consider to be the component pieces of who we are. I use myself as an example in this all the time, right? I am a Marine, right? Served 5 years in the Marine Corps. I have this fierce pride of having served. I have a fierce pride of having been enlisted. I have a stupidly fierce pride of having been a Marine because every Marine does, right? And yet, right, I have a deep cognitive dissonance over my service, right? After deployments and the things that I contributed to, the things I was a part of, the things I've learned after the fact, right? Like I left with a pretty strong moral injury. And the point for that is not to say that I'm able to reconcile that, right? That's not a wound that necessarily heals, but it's more to hold those two things, acknowledging that there's a tension, right? Part of who I am has to be able to hold this piece of my identity, these pieces of my identity, at the same time as saying, I need to learn from those experiences for how I want to activate myself in society, what the role is of being a citizen of these United States in this period of time that we find ourselves. And that never gets easier. Every summer when I'm on the road and I'm talking to you, when I met your cohort, when I'm talking to any other cohort, I met 15 of our cohorts this summer, right? So I'm all around. I got to meet, hundreds of enlisted veterans throughout the course of this. Every time I have one of these conversations, I come away with a better conceptualization of my own understanding of myself, but also of the wider veteran space. I think that one of the big, initiatives that a lot of veterans, civilians as well, are working on is to improve the transition assistance program. I'm supportive of those things, right? WSP and I myself, in my personal capacity, have advocated for some of these things in the past. And, and I think it's critically important that if we were to do a thought experiment, if we assume that TAP was perfect, right? It did everything that it possibly could. It's the ideal circumstance. You have command support structure for it. You have the right curriculum. It's taught by the right people. There's an adequate amount of time. I still think that it would be a mistake for us as a community to assume that TAP could do the ultimate work that is required for successful transition, right? And here's why. Because you need to have an internal desire to face those really hard questions of who you are. It's not just about the resume. It's not just about the job application. It's not just about, that immediate next step, right? Housing, food security, those things really matter, right? Like, so I don't mean to diminish the value of getting a job on the other end of it, but you need to have an intrinsic desire or have some sort of external force which is encouraging you to take a step back and really think deeply and ask those tough questions about what happens when you go from this deeply communal environment to suddenly being an individual on the other side. And so this may, for people that are unfamiliar with Warrior Scholar Project, sound far afield from what you would presume to be like the more narrow constructs of an education college prep organization. But it's so much more than that, right? The reason that it's
Yes.
transformational, the reason that we end up with these raving fans such as yourself, right? Thank you for, being such a strong fan, and spokesperson for WSP. But the reason that that happens is not because we said, here's how you take notes, right? Like, yeah, we talk about how to take notes, but it's in the broader
Hmm.
context of how you are situating yourself when you show up to that campus, and then how do you make those informed choices. That's the lasting change that we seek.
And so there was so much material that we can, just divulge just for that from that conversation. But I truly believe what you're saying, right? That it's not if everything was perfect, which we know that it's a far stretch from reality, but if everything was perfect, there is this massive void of first, as you mentioned, most people that join the military, especially as enlisted, why do we do it? Because we don't have a place that we're secured on. We don't have the ability to foresee what we're going to be doing in the future. We're delaying the next step. We're looking for community. We're looking for all these things, and we find it in the military to an extent. But there's a lot of other answers that we never prepare ourselves for, and I think it's mostly because we don't know that we're doing that. The biggest topic of identity, right? We all go through an identity crisis. We don't go, most of us don't know that we're going through that identity crisis, knowing that my rank was my identity for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
My job was my identity for so many years. My experience, my knowledge, my wisdom, right? And now I'm being projected somewhere that has no value or does not see necessarily what that value is or is confused. So now I'm explaining, hey, this is kind of what I did. This is what
Mm-hmm.
I did, how I did it. And sometimes we just get frustrated, right? But being faced with those things, and yes, you are correct. The training guide talks about these things, and we talk about it briefly. We also talk about how to properly study. We
Mm-hmm.
also how to be that book. I forget the name of the book right now off the top of my head, but how to be a straight A student. I think that's the name of it.
Yeah.
That book was amazing. I was like, why isn't every single school
Yeah.
make this a required reading before we go through it?
Yeah.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And it's such a powerful program that is full of golden nuggets all the way across it. That if you only grab one of them, you're already giving it back, right?
Yeah.
And now if you're able to sustain with it and actually dive deeper into it past that 1 week and actually learn more, it's just you're going to be super successful.
Yeah.
But one thing that I did want to mention, and I wanted to ask you is part of your identity crisis because you realize that you were part of the Department of the Navy instead of just the Marine Corps. I mean, we all struggle through that. Being the Navy is the best branch in the world, so
There's that. Listen, I got to interject for a second before you even ask your question. I had an opportunity to MC an event for the 250th anniversary of the Navy at the Union League Club here in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and in front of a bunch of sailors, I got up there and I said, "Look, as a Marine, I got to say thank you for 250 years worth of rides, and that was great, and I was able to." And Admiral Richardson, who's the former Chief of Naval Operations, who was the keynote, got up and said, "All right, thanks, Ryan. I think look on the podium here. I think you left your crayons, so I'm happy to give these back to you afterwards, right?" So
Let's
it's like, all right, that's the
go.
good, like he got it, right? He turned it around and flipped it on me, so that was good. So yes, deep identity crisis. You're right. Yes.
Oh no, but in all seriousness, and this is one of the things that most civilians will never understand. Why we're able to have these little jokes, puns, and different things,
Yeah.
and but we truly value, with
Yeah.
beyond the shadow of a doubt, what and the contribution that every single service member,
Yeah.
regardless of the rank,
Yeah.
regardless of the branch, what they did and how they did it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, but it's just fun to have that kind of rivalry, right? And one more thing to talk about is you. Let's go back before we get there. How did you get involved
Yeah.
with the Warrior Scholar Project?
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I think those two things are actually quite closely connected. So one of the things, again, we talked about this in the boot camps, but more broadly within Warrior Scholar Project, and part of my own reflections and growth as an individual, as a leader, uh, is that I needed at 17 years old to step on those yellow footprints and to have all these pieces of my identity, right? Suddenly the volume on all of those things gets turned down because all that matters is can you do the thing that you're being told to do or yelled at to do in those moments, right? Like get off the bus, get online, step on the yellow footprints, right? We're going to shave your head. We're going to make you look like just as similarly as everybody else as we can. You have a little bit of a holding platoon, but then you're going to go into your actual platoon. You're going to get your rack, right? Like all of those things I needed that at 17 to wake the hell up, right? Like that was something. I was a very apathetic high schooler. I come from a privileged background, right? Upper middle class in the suburbs of Chicago. My father's a physician, right? An immigrant, right? From Romania, somebody who worked incredibly hard to be able to come here. My grandparents, my mother's side, immigrants, right? Escaping or fleeing from a refugee situation from Europe over here, right? So I come from this background of people that have just had to work tirelessly to be able to build this life. And then I'm just sort of floating through it, right? At 17 years old. I get rejected from the flagship state school that I wanted to go to, which was University of Illinois. And I'm really thankful for that rejection, right? They were absolutely right to reject me. My grades were fine. I had no great extracurriculars, right? Like there are many better candidates, right, that they accepted for that year. But I needed that seismic shift. It doesn't matter where you came from. Doesn't matter where the people to your left and your right and in front of and behind you came from. All that matters is can you, as a unit, do the thing, right? This obsession with drill, I think, is so fascinating because part of the vision for drill is that you do not stand out. Everybody needs to be marching literally in lockstep, right? Those things really matter. And that was important for me, the sense of community that you get, right? Where the strength is from the unit, not from the individual. Now, as you go up through the ranks, right, as things change, yeah, there's obviously like leadership really matters. Not everybody is treated exactly the same. But there is still an expectation consistently throughout the military, no matter what you did, of this unit mentality, that community side. And that's part of what really fuses us together, right? That's part of why you and I can meet, right? And there are some built in jokes, even from the first time that we would necessarily meet, right? There's these things that we can call back to, this cultural side of it. And so when I got out of the military, 2010, similar to a lot of folks, right? I'm thinking, well, now who are my people, right? The long story medium is that I ended up at University of Michigan to complete my undergraduate degree, and that was after getting rejected initially from Michigan, right? So I applied, and they rejected me. At that time, I knew I actually wanted to go to school, right? I didn't quite know everything I wanted to do with it, right? But I knew I wanted to do it, and so I talked to the admissions office, and they said, "Well, you haven't actually proven that you can be a good student. Yeah, you're a Marine, great. These things are helpful, but this is a good school, right? Like you're applying to be a transfer student into a great school." And that's fair enough, right? And so I enrolled in community college on base, Coastal Carolina Community College, in my last few months of active duty, and was able to do well there. And then Michigan admitted me in that same cycle that they had initially rejected me. And so flash forward to August of 2010, I'm one of 28,000 undergrads suddenly, right? And it's like, oh my goodness, who are my people? Again, I go from this unit, no matter what my thoughts were on military service, right? No matter what my thoughts were on deployments, I had my people, right? I had my mission, I had my sense of purpose. And now I have to find an apartment, okay? I have to figure out what classes I want to take, get some loose advice from the advising office, but not really, right? Not really anything that was close and tailored and somebody that really understood who I was. And it turns out that I had a connection to fellow veterans, right? Like, who would have thought, right? But I had an internal resistance to that at first. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go that path. I wanted to have some sort of clean separation, and it just was not authentic. One of the most important pieces for me was Outward Bound used to do these free veteran cohort trips. And so before I started school, I got to go and climb Mount Huron out in Colorado with a handful of veterans who were at Michigan already. And so I was able to build some of that community, right? This being outdoors, being together. And then I just started showing up to meetings, to veterans meetings. Okay, I'll go for some free pizza, right? And then one thing snowballs into another, right? There's an opportunity to be able to step in and to, be a treasurer for this. Okay, fine, right? Like I can balance the pizza budget. I can do that. That's something I'm capable of doing. And then, okay, we need somebody to lead the club. And so I got involved with student veteran affairs in a way that felt really good, even in a way that I couldn't necessarily articulate why, right? Like I was a very average Marine, was good at my job, right? Arabic translator, could do my job. I was proficient. Wasn't the best Arabic translator, right? I wasn't the most, I was never going to be the true tip of the spear, right? And I knew that, right? Like I was just going to be, had a good PFT, right? Like plenty of average things, but never somebody that really rose to the top in the leadership position. So here in school, I started to take on a little bit more of the leadership role. I went on to teach for a couple of years. I taught high school in Detroit through Teach for America, in between law school and undergrad. And while I was there, I kind of thought, okay, the student veteran piece is done. That was it. Now I'm going to use this as the transition. And along the way, one of my close friends, who I learned Arabic with and then deployed with, called me up and said, "Hey, there's this thing at Yale. It's called Warrior Scholar Project. Wacky idea. What they did was they brought 9 veterans to Yale in 2012, and they ran them through this thing they're calling an academic boot camp. And it's 2013. They're doing it again. You should come check it out." And so I did. And I went and observed. I just observed. I just like on a lark was like, you know what? I'm on my path to law school. I'm still interested in the student veteran space. I trust this friend. I'm going to go out and see it. And what I saw, I was only there for a day, and I got dropped into a session that was already happening, right? My flight landed. I go over to New Haven, meet the co-founders, and just get invited to go join a session. And there was a professor, the late Charles Hill, and he was teaching a session on Tocqueville's Democracy in America. And he was leading this group. That cohort was 12. He was leading this group of, tatted up a cohort of 12 tatted up veterans on the equality of conditions argument. And they had done the reading, right? And they're going toe to toe with this incredible legendary professor, on the materials, right, that are actually covered there. And it was just like, what universe did I step into, right? They're doing this not for
Exactly.
grades, not for credit, right? They're doing this because they want to improve themselves. And I talked to the professor afterwards, and I was just like, hey, like, is this just what Yale is like? It's like, no, this is not. Like, I don't get that level of engagement from my regular Yale students, right? And I was like, okay, so whatever has been created here, I'm in, right? Just like, and so they gave us permission to take that model, which it was in its infancy, right? They'd just gone through their
Hmm.
second year. They gave us permission in 2014 to take that model and to try it at Michigan, at my alma mater. At the same year, they also gave permission to another group to try it at Harvard. And so in 2014, it was on 3 campuses, and it was like the most rewarding experience of my life, right? Like it was messy as hell because it was like, well, where do we find housing and dining? Like, I don't know. Like I know some admitted, like, okay, so we're going to kind of like beg, borrow, and steal for the housing, right?
Right.
Where do we get faculty to volunteer their time? Like, well, guess what? I'm going to email and call up all my old faculty and be like, hey, so this is kind of
Want
in
to
your
help out?
area, right? Want to come in and do this? And people are like, yes, we had this writing group from Purdue through a connection through a Michigan student veteran. So this group from Purdue came over, right? Drove over and just knocked it out of the park. And it was intoxicating, right? Because the level of change that you saw, right, was unlike anything else that I had seen. And anything that I had taught in the high school classroom, the amount of change and transformation that can happen in this really condensed period of time
Hmm.
was intoxicating. And so at the end of that year, it's like, well, should we do it again next year? Yeah, of course we should, right? And so as I was going to law school, I would carve out a couple weeks each year to come back and to lead this program and then help train some of the directors for other schools. And then flash forward to 2018, I was working in the law firm, and there was an opportunity to come on board in the COO role in 2018 to Warrior Scholar Project, where they were on the verge of getting this capacity building grant to grow it into a larger organization. So I said yes. And then a year later, the board asked me to step into the CEO role in 2019. So I've been serving in that role ever since.
Wow. So first off, I let me stop, right? One, I didn't know this whole history. I knew a little bit, but not to this magnitude. And one, I already respect you as a human being before this even happened, right?
Thank you.
Um, but that is even more inspiring and more beautiful, right? Uh, to hear that and to hear this story because as someone coming into this, I'm like, oh, a whole bunch of people got together, they did it, magic happened, and now we're here, right?
Yeah.
But it's more beautiful to see and understand the growing pains
Mm,
and how easily this could have not been a thing, period,
yes.
right? And you mentioned, and this is, I find this extremely poetic and synergetic that we all want to have that clean cut. That was my time. Now it's time for me to move forward, right? I did that too. But then I was like, you know what? Let me obviously I have the podcast and I have other different things, but I enrolled myself into the what is it called? The VA work study program.
Mm,
And it wasn't fulfilling, it wasn't rich, but what really moved me was there's so many missed opportunities.
hmm.
Why the school's not doing this? Why are we wasting so many things that propelled me to advocacy, which is a different story that we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
But that eventually led me to you,
Yeah.
right? And when I was when I was going into it, I kept on seeing this thing about democracy, and I was like, dude, what is there more to learn about democracy? Like seriously, like of all the classes, I was like,
Yeah.
honestly, full transparency, I was like, you know what? It's gonna be an easy class. Let's move forward. Oh, was I surprised?
Yeah.
I If we
Yeah.
could get a book and just smack me in the back of the head, I was like, what is this? This is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
This is in the middle of my summer. Like, what's going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it was so enriching. And till this day, so right now I'm actually so two things. One, my degree path trajectory is changing because of this class, full transparency.
Yeah.
And then two, my ability to care about it. So right now I'm taking a political science class
Yeah.
and a labor union class. And yesterday we had to present for my midterm, my honors class midterm. And some of the things that I learned through the Warrior Scholar project came up while one of the professors was asking me.
Yeah.
And so it would just flew naturally. It was beautiful. And I was like, I cannot believe
Yep.
that this was a part of that, right? So that's also like full almost come about circle on this. But one of the things that I want to mention is that hasn't only happened to me.
Mm,
With all of the ones that all of the other Warrior Scholar Project participants that I've talked to,
yeah.
they've
Yeah.
had a similar experience.
Yeah.
The what was their title? I forget their title, but the students that were teaching us,
Oh, the fellows.
the
Yes.
fellows, the fellows.
Yeah.
Um, Also as a older student, I wanted to ask them questions, and I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And I asked them obviously because they're staying later than we're
Right.
staying up.
Right.
They already had a higher intense training beforehand.
Right.
I was like, what is your why? Why did you
Yeah.
choose to do
Yeah.
this? Right?
Yeah.
And every single one of them said, because when I went through it, this changed my life.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's another reason why I'm such a big fan of this program. And with that, can you tell us a little bit more, or for the first time,
Yeah.
what, if anything, is coming up in the future? What are the new dynamics or the new projects? What's
Yeah.
going on? What can we expect?
Yeah, sure. Well, by way of getting to a concrete answer, I'll hit on a couple things you said there, right? So one is this question of democracy, right? Like I love this question, right? And so I teach a few different times a year in various capacities. This summer, by the way the scheduling worked out, I ended up teaching our session on the Declaration of Independence twice. I taught it at our Harvard cohort, and then I taught it for our U Chicago cohort. And one of the practices that I've adopted is to actually have students read that out loud, right? So we go paragraph by paragraph and we read it out loud. And there is something, dare I say, sacred over having a group of enlisted veterans take ownership of that document, take collective ownership over this document, right? We swear to uphold and defend the Constitution, right? I tell folks I had never fully read the Constitution before I took that oath, right? I think that that's probably true for a lot of enlisted veterans, right? I did the Cliff Notes version for whatever civics, requirement I had in high school. That document really matters, but so too does this declaration, right? And so, what does it mean, right? And we talk about these twin pillars of equality and liberty, and we wrestle with it, right? And the goal is not to say, here's the answer, right? To be prescriptive with what that means, with what somebody's view is of those documents afterwards, but instead to say, what better population could there possibly be than a group of enlisted veterans to review these documents, to take that as a lens, not again just about how they pursue higher education, but channel that into civic impact, right? To be
Yes.
members of society that know what sacrifice looks like. I go through great lengths to not paint with a broad brush for the veteran community unless I think it's justified. I don't think all veterans are heroes because they're not. Most people are in agreement with that. I don't think all veterans are leaders, right? And that's one that I get a little bit of
No.
pushback from. But some
Yes.
people, right, think like, oh, all veterans are. No, no. Like I remember being a fire team leader when I was learning Arabic, and I had somebody that kept failing field day. It wasn't about how to teach that person the importance of failing field day. I was just assigned to watch them take out their trash can,
Hmm.
before inspection every Thursday, right? So there's a group of people. I think that there's a way that you can go through the military and never necessarily hone those sorts of leadership skills. So I think it matters when we clarify that somebody is actually a leader that produces many leaders, produces many heroes, but not all veterans are. But I think all veterans, we have 52 years into the all volunteer force. So this is true, at least for the past 52 years. All veterans volunteered, subjugated a portion of their freedom, of their liberty, swore to uphold and defend an institution, right, something much bigger than themselves, and then had to deal with the consequences of taking that oath for some period of time, right? For some people,
Hmm.
it's decades. For other people, it's much shorter. But that binds us together. So reading those documents, right, and
Hmm.
interrogating that, think about what does that mean? I have this deeply held conviction that enlisted veterans are an essential population for our country's future, right? And that can mean
Hmm.
it. Some people assume that I mean that in a political sense. I do, but I also mean that in the sense of outside of politics, where we have people that are just leaders, right? That are
Hmm.
cultivating these leadership skills and are channeling higher education and the growth of perspective, right? If we do our jobs well at WSP, when you were in the classroom and you were having a conversation about the constitutional framework or the Declaration of Independence or anything of that nature, right? That you would have these opposing viewpoints from people that have wildly different backgrounds and wildly different
Yes.
ideologies that are able to respectfully discuss those documents and come away with a growth of perspective. That's the
Yes.
magic, right? And again,
Yes.
not to be too much on, grandstanding in this area, but I believe firmly that this is what we need as a society, right? Is more of an ability to be able to interrogate those documents, to have real hard conversations on it, and to come away with a growth of perspective. We include this now in the field guide, but it's one of my favorite quotes. So I quote it all the time. But John Stuart Mill on Liberty says, "He who knows only his side of the case knows little of that, indeed."
Hmm.
Right? And that's it, right? If you can only defend your perspective, right? If you have this one view of democracy, of the Declaration, of any of these things, right, of how society functions, you should spend some time thinking about what the most compelling arguments are on the other side, right? So, long-winded way to get to actually a change that we're making for next year is we had previously referred to as humanities, STEM, and business. Part of our reflection is that the humanities course, right, is actually much more broadly about college readiness, right? Like, yes, there are these conversations of democracy, and but it's not as subject area specific as our STEM and business
Hmm.
cohorts are. So one of the changes that we're making is actually starting with this next application cycle. That's going to be referred to as WSP Core, which stands for College Readiness. So we're going to have WSP Core and then WSP STEM, WSP Business. Not huge changes to the actual underlying curriculum, right? The
Hmm.
actual you wouldn't know much if you were much of it. You wouldn't experience much of a difference if you were to go through that as opposed to this one. But we think that that name is actually important. Some veterans will self-select out of a humanities boot camp because they'll say, you
Yes.
know what, I don't want to major in humanities. You don't have to major in
Hmm.
humanities, right? This is the bedrock of reading, writing, discussing like a college student, right? So like that's
Yes.
actually that. So it's going to be WSP core. This is an important shift, and that we're going to be encouraging people consistently. You can still go straight to STEM and business, right? Provided that this matches with your, with your path.
Hmm.
But our encouragement to folks is to start with core, right? For us to really drill
Right.
down and figure out those pieces, no matter what you study, right? That's going to be beneficial. Um, Another thing you mentioned the fellows program, right? So the fellows are a bedrock to how WSP functions. So we hire about 30 of our alumni every year, and we train them to then be the ones who are in the classroom with you as a student, right? So if Yogi, if you were to come back now and serve as a fellow, right, you would be one of this cohort of 30, and you're working with 3 to 4 in teams of 3 to 4. You are deploying to each one of these boot camp locations, and then you are mentoring the students based off of what you've learned along the way. You're also helping to administer the course, and importantly, you're leading the sessions on what we refer to as college success, right? So, how do you make those informed choices about higher education? How do you take effective notes? How do you participate in a classroom discussion where somebody's saying something with which you disagree with? How do you actually function in those capacities? The fellows are part of the secret sauce for how WSP operates, right? If we had everything else about our model that was the same, but we removed the fellows program, it would cease to exist, right? It
Hmm.
would not have anywhere near the same impact because of exactly what you said. You, as somebody who's coming in with some sense of imposter phenomenon, a shared phenomenon that everybody has if they're unless they're arrogant, right? That everybody has some sense of,
Um,
of imposter phenomenon, but you're going to your fellows and you're saying, hey, what's this actually going to be like, right? Like that's the magic of it, right? Those sorts of conversations really matter. In terms of the other things that we have cooking, right? It depends on when this, and when this rolls out. As an alum, you have early access to this, but the thing that literally keeps me up at night, many nights, is the folks that are not in our network already, right? To your point, you are not your experience is special, but it's not unique in the sense that there are thousands of folks that have gone through Warrior Scholar Project and have had that transformational impact. Great. When somebody hits our funnel, right, when they apply to WSP, work with our talented admissions team, go to a boot camp, it works, right? It really, really, really works. But what about the people that aren't aware of Warrior Scholar
Yes.
Project, right? What about the people that become aware of it, but say, you know what, I don't have what it takes to succeed
Right.
there, or I'm not sure if this is the right thing. Instead, I'm going to go some other path. I'm just going to get, whatever the easiest degree is that I can get,
Hmm.
right? I have the benefits. Again, billions of dollars are being spent annually on that.
Hmm.
So we are tired of that, right? We want to be able to have a better answer to how we can reach orders of magnitude more students without losing sight of our core academic boot camps. And so we just did a soft launch of this. And this is the thing that in January that we're going to make a big deal about. And I think you and I will come back together, but having an actual on demand version of this, which is free, which is on Coursera, which is in the classroom, right? It's a dynamic course where we are running folks through everything on the college success side. And then we also have sessions that are spliced with discussions led by our fellows to a group of students, right? So you can have a sort of a fly on the wall view of what happens in the WSP classroom so that you could be deployed. You could be somebody who,
Yes.
your command isn't giving you adequate time to go to WSP. They won't grant you leave to do that, right?
Hmm.
Something like that. And you can still get, right? It takes about 10 hours to go through the entire course. You can still get a lot of the information that comes out of a WSP bootcamp. So the goal, again, is to serve thousands, tens of thousands
Right.
of people through that course. And then for the group on the other end that say that was really beneficial, imagine what it would be like to go through an entire in-person academic boot camp, right? To have that experience.
Yes.
Well, then come on in. The water's warm, right? Like we've got a seat, waiting for you. That's part of the huge. That's part of the vision. And now we're not just the vision. It's out there, right? So we're getting data from this, from the test
Yeah.
group, and then January we make a big old deal about it. So it's a lot of fun.
So again, a lot of material to talk about, right? But I want to dive a little bit more into what you just finished and this Coursera course, right? I remember during COVID, I was in Iwakuni, Japan, preparing to go to Iwo Jima. island because we were preparing our carrier to go, and I was stuck. So I went through Coursera and I ended up doing two courses. And honestly, they were random. And I searched for leadership, I searched for multiple different things, and I started like six of them, but I only really did two of them because they were not really bringing that value
Sure.
that want and desire. But I did search multiple times, how can I be successful at taking college classes?
Yeah.
Because that was, and still to this point is one of my biggest fears. I'm 2 years into going to college and I'm
Yep.
still afraid to
Yep.
take college classes.
Yep.
So I think being able to have that conversation beforehand, I think it is a huge pathway because to your point, I talk to so many service members that are currently going to school that are about to transition. They're like, oh, well, no, those are Ivy League schools. I don't need that. Or those are two big schools. I don't need that. I'm just gonna go to community college. I don't need that. Is like, bro, that's not what this is about. Yes, it can open up a pathway if you want
Right.
to go there,
Right.
but it's to get you into the mindset to be successful
Right.
in school.
Absolutely.
And it's just we one more point that you mentioned is unless you're arrogant, right? You know for a fact that you're suffering through imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
And it is such a difficult item to tackle that also, even if there was going back to part of the previous the original conversation, right? Even if Taps was doing everything possible and
Right.
perfect,
Right.
we would still face that imposter syndrome no matter
Yeah.
what.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I do want to mention this, right? That even though you can't get rid of it through the WSP bootcamp, you are able to address part of it, right?
Hmm.
Um, I was born and raised in Mexico City. ESL, my biggest fear my entire life, Ryan, has been how to properly communicate.
Mm.
Writing is like speaking is like right here in my fears. Writing, there's no level to where I can say that I'm ever comfortable writing, period, point blank.
Mm.
And going through the humanities, which now is going to be called core, put some of that at ease.
Yeah.
Being able to have a conversation with scholars that all they do is write.
Yeah.
It's some feedback, some criticism that is not negative criticism, but it's actually how can we help you build it up
Yeah.
was amazing. And again, I just finished the speech for my honors program yesterday, and my wife was like, "Are you gonna be okay?" Because I was super stressed out,
Yeah.
and but I was having some of those conversations in my head
Yeah.
with some of the staff that helped us go through our own writing topics while I was there. And it helped me put my mind even more at ease.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just want to say I am grateful
Yeah.
for this. I'm grateful for everything that you're doing. You yourself were a fellow without the title of a fellow because you taught and you brought this to different schools and you did it. And now you have created this path for everyone that's listening, right? And for everyone that has done the program, if you could break it down marine style, you can write it in crayons if you want to.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Why should anyone apply to this program? Why should anyone apply to be a fellow?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I have to hit on, what you shared there as well, because I think that you're such a good example of what perseverance looks like, intentionality, because I don't think anybody could connect with you and come away with the belief or the impression that speaking is hard, that public speaking is hard for you, right? I haven't read your writing, but I suspect also, right, that you are, as hard as that is, right, that this is something that you have a skill that you're continuing to hone, right? And that is constant improvement. I speak in front of groups regularly, and I am very critical of my own public speaking. And I have people, right, one person in particular on staff who, whenever he's in the audience and he's listening, I'm like, all right, how did I do it? And he's going to tell me exactly how many ums I had, right? How many times I took an awkward pause, how many times I say the word right. I have this weird tick where I'll say right, like all the time. And so when there's something that you want to improve upon, you take the opportunity to be able to do that. And so I want to call that out and say, specifically, right, that you have, you really, and I saw this at the Yale course as well. You have an ability to be able to build community in a really authentic, warm way, and part of that comes from your enthusiasm and your authenticity and your ability to be able to acknowledge you don't have all the answers, but that you are somebody that's striving to continue to lift others up. And I think you and I are very aligned, as are many in the veteran community, that that is one of the most fulfilling imaginable things that we could do with our time, right? Is to lift up others, not from a position of saying we have all the answers or we have all the resources, but to be able to open up those real conversations. And I think that broadly within the veteran community, the more of that we have, the more that people are able to build that authentic community. And that matters for people that are, again, are at the tip of the spear to be able to be in these leadership positions, but it also matters for people that are just really struggling, right? Um, we all have people in our communities, right, that have been in those, that are in those battles, right, or some that have lost those battles. And I'm a firm believer that the more authentic that we are and the more open we are to the things that we have figured out and the things that we don't, then that's actually a huge healing component to how we build those bridges together. So thank you for being such an active member of the community. And this ties into what my pitch is to anybody who potentially is interested in Warrior Scholar Project, right? Is that if the conversation that you and I are having here, if that resonates with folks, this is WSP. This is WSP. This is the realness of it, right? It's not just here's how you read a syllabus. It's not just even a seminar, no matter how good it would be on democracy. It's the real conversations among people that care. And if folks are interested in higher education, they can be in your position where they've completed community college or they've done a couple semesters. It could be that they've never signed up for a college course. So long as they are enlisted, right? Love me some commissioned officers. They've got other pathways, right? The other organizations can support them.
Yes.
Um, but if you're enlisted, and you do not yet have your undergraduate degree, those are the two core eligibility criteria for WSP, then you should check this out, right? If you have some sort of interest or some sort of inclination towards higher education, or you could already be in pursuit of it, we have some people that only have one or two classes left to complete their bachelor's. Fine, right? Come on
Mhm.
in. The water's warm. Then go to warrior-scholar.org. The barrier to entry is deliberately very low, where we just have an interest form. You don't get access to the full application on the website. When you click the
Yeah.
apply button in the top right, what you get is just a very brief interest form. And then you have to talk to a member of my team, right? You have to have a
Yes.
conversation with somebody on my admissions team because we want you to understand what this thing is and we want to learn more about you. Then there is an application process. But the reality is that we want to find a seat for everybody who needs a seat, right? That's
Mhm.
part of our growth strategy. And then importantly too, come January, right? Everybody will have access. If you say, I'm not even quite sure what this thing is yet, let me actually see what it's like in the classroom. Well, then
Yes.
guess what? Coursera in partnership with Yale, right? Our course is going to be there. We're going to be obnoxiously loud about it in the veteran space because we want every veteran to be aware of what this is. And then the last thing I'll say on this is, why should somebody consider being a fellow? Well, Yogi, listen, as you continue to pursue your undergraduate degree, you better believe, right, that you're the sort of target market for this. People that believe in this thing, that are now having their own experience in the higher education space to come and work for WSP for purposes of a summer, right? It's a paid gig, a lot of training. It's incredibly intense. It's hard work, but my God, is it rewarding, right? To be on that side of it. So we want alumni to be able to pay it forward and for us to be able to make sure that they are trained and equipped to really excel in those positions.
Well, Ryan, unfortunately, we're coming close to out of time. Um, I would love to sit here and talk to you for the next 5 to 10 hours, but that would be not fair to you. And obviously not to the rest of the community because you do so much. So I want to tell you thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for continuing to support and, as you mentioned, raise the whole community. This is one of the phrases that I use consistently. Rising tides raise all ships,
Yep.
right? And I'm just grateful to be in your universe, grateful to be in community with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for what you do, and I'll see you at NatCon.
Let's do it.